Why Belgium? Because they have the largest 3D printer, and they use a material that's like flexible, like resin. So what we wanted to create here was something that felt like immediately like the Queen. And immediately would make you feel like we're in a forward-thinking place. So we 3D printed her shoulder mantle. We used the African lace, which is a traditional lace that's worn for special ceremonies. And the ishikolo is the hat that she's wearing. That's the South African married woman's hat. It's usually woven, so we wanted to use some of the same line work that you see in the ishikolo and put it in the computer and design the algorithms and send it to Belgium and have it printed out.
I mean, how much of these costumes were developed through that kind of process of fabrication here or in Belgium versus these found objects? Like I think Shuri's beads are all clay beads.
Clay beads, paper beads, that whole process of recycling, and I really wanted it to look like something that she has had for many years, ever since she was a child. So the beads to me needed to look childlike. But it's a very expensive process, the 3D printing, just like vibranium is expensive. So we actually did these two pieces only. We did it in black, and we did it in white, this off-white color. But I really wanted to do more. It's just very expensive.
But are there still like fragments of the costumes? I mean, you mentioned the blankets were sourced
South Africa. I had shoppers all over the continent because I wanted to be inspired by the authentic pieces. I had them looking for antique pieces. I really wanted to see what the real rings felt like, and they're very heavy. I wanted to be inspired by the real humba, the clay, the shea butter and the clay that they make, that they mix, then they put it all over their skin, they put it in their hair, and they make these incredible headpieces like you see Connie wearing here. I wanted to be inspired by, the real pieces. So they sent me a lot of things from Africa.
So this piece, for instance, is in reference to a Maasai headdress?
The Maasai headdress there, in the comics, in the tribal council, there is a Maasai tribal leader, and he has the headdress on. And I asked Ryan if he wanted to see one of our leaders in the tribal council in a Maasai headdress, which he did not. He preferred to have the guy with the lip plate. So I had to have the Maasai headdress in the film. So I got a Pier 1 placemat, and I cut a hole in it, and it was really hard to cut through that thing. But we stayed up late one night, and we made that.
And then maybe you can talk a little bit about Zuri's costume here, this extraordinary kind of shaman, witch doctor.
Yes, he's like a shaman. Incredible language here. There is a language to Wakanda. There are tabards. You see tabards on the Dora Milaje. You'll see a tabard on Zuri. Neck rings are part of the language of Wakanda. So, the Dora have neck rings. He's wearing neck rings. The beadwork is like that of the Turkana tribe. And so, beadwork and the authenticity of the beadwork was very important. I wanted the tabards to feel like, there are elements of their costumes that could be passed on, onto generations. And he was kind of represented all the tribes. If we were to examine all the elements of his costumes, you'd see Turkana and you'd see Lesotho, you'd see a little bit of everything there. But it was a very difficult costume to make. His cloak was creased like the Izumiyaki style of creasing the fabric, which was very detailed. His poncho is made up of hundreds of little silk tubes that we sewed together and created this incredible poncho that nobody in my office really wanted to make, but I made them do it.
And maybe before we move on to talk about the Black Panther suit itself, I mean, just in my setup, I was describing the way that a lot of these types of movies are shot. where literally it's just these extraordinary costumes on the actor, and then as you were describing in the green room, a car park with blue walls.
Right, it's a parking lot with green screen all around it, and sometimes it's a little bit surprising, even to me. I've spent so much time creating these costumes and getting people, to transform into these characters and feel the moment, and then we go to set and we're in the parking lot surrounded by green screen. And as you saw T'Challa come down the steps of the aircraft. Well, yeah, that's just a plank of steps, and that's it. With green screen and little points that they put in later. So it is kind of, I feel like the actors have a really difficult job trying to imagine what the world is that they're standing in when they're not standing in a world. But the costume must give them some relief and give them some support. And that's what I strive to do, is to support the actor and to support their vision and from the inside out how they feel wearing the costume.
And they're there through the process of fittings, and they kind of, there's a process of evolving their camera through that act of starting to wear all of the things.
Absolutely. I mean, in my fitting room, there is an illustration of your costume. There's an illustration of the world that you're in. It's kind of a very immersive experience coming into my office, especially on Black Panther, where I had masks around the room. You could actually feel like you were in the costume department in Wakanda. And that felt good. So we transformed in the fitting rooms, and a lot of times it was really stressful because there wasn't a lot of prep. I started in July. I transitioned to Atlanta in October. We were shooting in January, and the Panther costume was not finished. We couldn't actually shoot any scenes with the actual Panther suit until the end of February when it was finished.
And you mentioned the Panther suit. I mean, it is a superhero film, and there's no escaping that we have this costume, we have the legacy of this extraordinary IP.
Yes.
And I imagine from a marketing perspective in relationship to the Marvel canon,
Yes.
The pressure around this must be immense, and perhaps there's very little room to move within that space.
There's wiggle room in there. You'd be surprised. There's some wiggle room in there. But it's an incredible design by Adi Gradov. Adi Gradov was on the Marvel visual development team, and he took the Panther legacy, Black Panther legacy, and he created this costume. And there's a part to this story I think that superhero costumes sometimes don't bridge into, and that is this is a king in Africa. So I took a look at Adi's design, and there's a surface treatment that's on it that's basically computer generated. And I felt like there needed to be an Africa connection, so we created this triangle pattern. We called it the Okavango pattern. And it's kind of like the sacred geometry of Africa. They say it represents the father, the mother, and the child. And so we decided to put this triangular pattern all over the costume as a surface treatment. There's also a Wakandan language that's veins throughout the costume. So when he's met with the kinetic energy, it lights up. And so together, that Wakandan language that's veining throughout the costume with this triangular pattern, this surface pattern, when you zero in on this costume, it looks like a roller print. It looks like African tapestry. It looks like African fabric that you see on many African costumes or ceremonial costumes. And I was really proud of that, because as you come in and you see his face and you see him moving about Wakanda, he really belongs there. It really feels like a tapestry from the continent.
And of course there's a history to this costume, and I wonder if you can talk about where you think this film or this version of the Black Panther sits within its lineage, because I mean the image I have up on the screen now is I think the very first cover for Black Panther in 1966 when the character first appears, perhaps an attempt by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to connect with black readers. Here we see that it's not a full-face cow, but he has an exposed face. But very quickly, Marvel, potentially fearing that the South wouldn't distribute a comic with a hero that was explicitly black, gave the character on the cover a full-face cow. So really, it's a superhero film, but at the same time, it's an extraordinary platform to start to talk about some of these issues. I wonder if you felt that history, or is that part of the conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, my first day at Marvel, Marvel's like the CIA. Doors mysteriously slam behind you as you walk in, and I thought, why me? Why? I have never done a superhero film. What is my role as an artist? I've done a lot of historical biopics, never a superhero film. And I sat with Ryan Coogler and Nate Moore on my first meeting. I had amassed a large amount of images that I thought would make up of Wakanda and put them together in a file on a Dropbox, And my Dropbox wouldn't open on Marvel's studio lot. So I was, quite, nervous about that. And Ryan, who was very, very quiet and very intense, just said, I went to see Malcolm X when I was a young boy. I remember that film. I went with my dad. I remember I sat on his lap and watched that film with him, and I remember the costumes. I'm really glad you're here to help us craft this Black Panther film. And so I kind of felt like, I had auditioned for Black Panther when he was a little boy. But also that, he felt like I had been doing superheroes all the time, Malcolm X and Thurgood Marshall and all those other films.
And I guess I did want to touch on your history in cinema, because you have been making films since the 80s and 90s, I suppose.
Beginning of your birth.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you've worked on those seminal projects like Malcolm X, like Do the Right Thing. And I think your first Oscar nomination was for Malcolm X, right? 21 years before.
Yeah.
Before you were back
Malcolm
on stage.
X in Amistad was 96, and then it took 21 years to get the Black Panther.
Right. But it's interesting that in a way, sometimes in forums like this, we kind of look down on the superhero film as being the typical fodder of popular culture, but at the same time, as I'm trying to describe, it is a platform that reaches an extraordinary amount of people.
Yes, I feel like it was a film for the ages. I feel like people were ready for this type of film. It spoke to a lot of needs.
Yeah, and it's been this kind of global vehicle to broadcast potentially a whole lot of things that have been going on since the 80s and the sorts of films that you've been working on, and now we're at a point where Afrofuturism has almost gone mainstream. And I guess I wanted to kind of conclude our conversation. I think I mentioned I was going to show this clip, and maybe we can talk a little bit afterwards of what happened when a poster like this makes it into a mainstream multiplex.
All the time? So we sitting here looking at this dope-ass Black Panther poster, and the conclusion that we have come to is that this is what white people get to feel all the time.
All the time. All the time.
Since the beginning of cinema.
All the time.
You get to feel empowered like this and represented.
This is what y'all feel like all the time? I would love this country too.
That was great.
And in a way, the time when this film first came out, The internet was on fire. It was the most tweeted about film of the year. We would see tweets and kind of memes like this one, where the king from Coming to America wears his line-hide sash, alongside captions like, "This is how I'm going to show up to the Black Panther film premiere." And of course, and with this slide on the screen for a reason, because you're now working on Coming to America 2, the sequel.
Yes. It's a lot of work.
And I wonder if we can just talk a little bit in the end, just to draw some of these themes to a close, about how you think films have the capacity for change, and how might they kind of operate to start to do that?
I feel like you do have anachronisms with film. You have to speak to the audience. You have to entertain as well as inform. And, you know, with Coming to America that was done in the 80s, we can't do it the same way it was done then. It was kind of like a colonized version of Africa. And now that we have had Black Panther to sort of, you know, inform us, we have to reimagine Zamunda in such a way where we have on display real tradition and real Africa, and we can actually be fun about it and light about it. If Wakanda was like the tribal hub of Africa, then Zamunda is like the fashion capital, and the wealthiest of the continent, or something lighthearted like that. So I just think that the responsibility that I've always carried about how I project my art, how I communicate through costume design, is always rooted in truth. And, you know, that's, I think, what resonates with people. I feel like that's what connects with people, whether you're laughing or crying, it does touch you somewhere real.
Thanks, Ruth. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. Get up.
Check.
Okay, sick. So we're going to keep on rolling on our tour. Here now we head beneath Kentucky, and we make our way along a secret highway of long lost in the caves. So lighting our way for the next section of our tour is Ben Babbitt of game studio Cardboard Computer, developers of the award-winning magical realist odyssey Kentucky Route Zero. So Ben has crafted the score and sound design for the game, a work of atmosphere and intrigue, rather than weapons armories, headshots, or first-person carnage. Do we need to, like, deal with a bar run or something before we keep on moving?
Definitely.
Is that what's happening?
Yeah, totally feel free.
If people could, like, quietly get a drink and quietly make their way back to the seats, that would be fantastic. We've got an awful lot to get through, so we are going to kind of try and keep moving, so maybe you need to, like, hold it in or grab 2 drinks to keep you prepared. So Ben also composes for film and theater. Tonight, as I said at the top of the intro, we asked Ben to compose the soundtrack and score for the evening, which is taken from a lot of the music in the game. And now he'll be taking us along that invisible road to meet all the mysterious folks who travel along it. Thanks so much for joining us, Ben.
Hey guys, how's it going? This computer's glitching out a bit. Yeah, thanks to Liam and everybody here at SCI-Arc for having me here. My name's Ben Babbitt. I'm one-third of Cardboard Computer, an independent game studio based in Chicago, Los Angeles, and E-Town, Kentucky. Since 2013, I've been working on the episodic narrative game called Kentucky Route Zero alongside programmer Jake Elliott, who also writes the text, and Tomas Kamenci, who creates the visual art and animations. Kentucky Route Zero is a point-and-click text adventure in the lineage of early computer games like Oregon Trail, and Colossal Cave Adventure, another game that happens to be about the Mammoth Cave systems in Kentucky. Our friend Marie Fulston, a games curator at the V&A Museum in London, writes that Kentucky Route Zero is a mysterious, magical, realist adventure game that focuses on narrative and atmosphere. Its story is deceptively simple. You play as Conroy, a truck driver making deliveries for an antique shop, traveling the roads of Kentucky with your dog and looking for an elusive address. But the game focuses on developing characters' interior thoughts and feelings, favoring these literary aspects over the more traditional puzzle-solving features of the genre. Set in rural Kentucky, this game is about people living under capitalism in America, navigating the mysteries of healthcare and the debt cycles perpetuated by economic precarity and wage disparity. As the people struggle to live in this present, making culture with whatever is at their disposal, they encounter each other while coexisting with the ghosts of their historical landscape. Jake says that for characters in this game, the future is a promise, a broken promise made by a faceless energy company. The cancellation of the future has consequences for the natural flow of time, now erratic, unpredictable, and out of joint. We see art and culture from many times coexisting in a murky now. So the game takes a cue from the multi-act structure of a play and unfolds across 5 acts with transitional interludes between each of them. There's almost no voice acting, and instead the story is delivered through a text window that allows you to choose lines of dialogue for different characters, sometimes becoming privy to a stream of memories while holding an unrelated conversation. The player does not steer the plot of the story so much as they're able to inflect the tone of the characters, not unlike the way a director might work with a cast of actors in a film. In creating the world of Kentucky Route Zero, we've drawn from a wide range of other artworks, mediums, and art historical moments, not just to give us something to react to as creators, but also to provide us a vivid sense of specificity, acting as a root system that connects it to the real world. In writing the text, Jake has drawn from 20th century literary traditions like the magical realism of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Southern Gothic writers like William Faulkner and Flannery O'Connor, and playwrights Arthur Miller and Samuel Beckett. This in turn informed the visual design, often appearing in illusionistic cutouts, collapsed interior and exterior spaces reminiscent of theatrical set design. In shaping how the player experiences these visual environments, Tomas has also deployed techniques reminiscent of the deliberate pacing and camera work of slow cinema filmmakers like Andrei Tarkovsky, Akira Kurosawa, and Michael Snow.
Do you know what
while also folding in allusions to painters like René Magritte and brutalist architecture. These contexts have also informed the approaches to music and sound design in the game. One of the main elements of the score is a set of regional folk traditionals modeled after recordings made by Kentucky folk legend Bill Monroe in the 1940s. These songs appear once in each act to provide added thematic commentary and are sung by a fictional band of characters emulating the chorus in a 5th century Greek tragedy. The sound isn't working. Another foundational element of the score is the atmospheric synth-heavy ambient music. So I don't know what that. Sorry, not getting sound here. Get sound when you don't want it, and don't when you do.
I think there's sound coming through my laptop, not Ben's.
Great.
Yeah, that's my laptop.
It's their fault. You get it? It's set to. Sorry about that. Whoa. Great. Oh, man. Going? All right. Yeah, like I said, another foundational element of the score is the use of atmospheric, synth-heavy ambient music. Just as various points in history are visually layered and share space in the game, increasingly disparate musical forms coexist as a way to express this idea sonically in an almost subconscious way that also helps to disrupt any mounting sense of touristic nostalgia and regional stereotypes. As the world of the game becomes more richly developed, the music comes increasingly from within the frame, emanating from skipping records, tinning gas station radios, and performed by other characters taking part in the story and not only commenting on it from the sidelines, such as this piece of displaced liturgical organ music played in the second act, reminiscent of 20th century French composer Olivier Messiaen. Elsewhere in the game, we encounter a set of woozy lap steel lounge songs performed in a subterranean tiki bar a la Brian Eno's Apollo atmospheres and soundtracks, an eerie theremin piece performed on the deck of a tugboat in tribute to Clara Rockmore, and an interactive radio interface populated with multiple stations broadcasting our increasingly distinct and varied expansion of the game world. A culmination of the various textual, visual, and musical evolutions in the game occurs in the third act with a performance by the shape-shifting android Junebug and their partner Johnny, whose idiosyncratic banter mirrors that of Gogo and Dee Dee from Waiting for Godot. As these characters and their surroundings transform, the different ways of delivering the story are now deployed all at once. While taking in the performance, the player chooses the lines of the song they want Junebug to sing, resulting in a mathematically endless set of outcomes that all express the sentiment of the song. So although we're primarily telling this story in the form of a video game, our interests in other art forms and the desire to explore more remote corners of our fictional world have led us to experiment with other mediums and contexts. For instance, I really enjoyed making the Junebug song in the bar that you just saw, and I wanted to keep exploring that creative voice outside of its utility in the game. So I wrote and recorded 10 more songs as this character, and made a live-action interactive music video for one of the songs on the album. However, the primary way that we collectively have played with other mediums through the interludes between each act that focus mostly on minor characters in the game. The first one is called Limits and Demonstrations. Originally designed as a way new players could test the technical demands of the game on the graphics cards on their computers for free, it consists of the members of the folk band walking through a retrospective exhibition of sculptures by the character Lula Chamberlain, a reformed artist, now bureaucratic office clerk. The second interlude, The Entertainment, is a pair of plays written by character Lem Doolittle in the mid-1970s. The plays are performed simultaneously in the interlude as directed by character James Carrington, a frustrated dramaturg dogged by car troubles. It's comprised of a downloadable scene with the option to experience it in VR, as well as a print edition of the scripts themselves. The third interlude is a travel hotline for the Echo River, voiced by actor and musician Will Oldham. The phone number is real and takes you through an index of wildlife, dream analysis, and occasionally prompts the caller to make their own recordings, later becoming a set of voice messages for the characters in the fourth act.
Hello. You have dialed into Here and There Along the Echo, a guide to the Echo River for drifters and pilgrims. This guide is a public service provided by the Bureau of Secret Tourism. For historical sites along the Echo River, press 1. For a guide to the river's flora and fauna, press 2. For help identifying an unfamiliar sound, press 3.
Call anytime. The travel guide is also presented as a downloadable scene where you can interact with the phone as a character in the game. Additionally, Tomas hacked a collection of vintage touch-tone phones, embedding the hotline and rendering the phone only capable of dialing one number. We then auctioned these phones online as various obscure characters from the game, like Dot, the E-Town phone lady, and made a live telecast tracking one of the auctions, now living on as a gripping 4-hour YouTube video. The most recent of these interludes, released at the beginning of 2018, is called Un Pueblo de Nada. It has its roots in a fictional public access station called WEVP-TV, which is partly based on an archive of 1970s broadcasts by the first pirate television station in the US called Lansville TV. One component of this interlude is a downloadable scene where you play as the characters producing this broadcast. Hosted by Rita Book, the show includes conversations with distinguished locals, a pretty dire weather report, and a poetry reading interspersed with homemade videos submitted by members of the community. The other component of the interlude is a live-action version of the broadcast itself. We all really enjoyed the collaborative process of working with Will as a voice actor on the travel hotline, and we were interested in exploring this further with this interlude. Jake actually knew somebody who worked at the local public access station where he lives in E-Town, Kentucky, so we all went down there along with actor Maria Lucio, who plays Rita, to shoot the full scripted broadcast fleshed out by a cast of local actors. Leading up to the broadcast, we also screened a series of related videos on the website WEVP TV, which is still running. So as the game began to spill out into these other mediums, we noticed some unexpected reactions and strange echoes of our little world pop up in the real world, removed from its original context. In 2013, real human artist Lee Tussman mounted an exhibition at the Philadelphia Art Gallery Little Berlin, consisting of physical reproductions of the sculptures by the character Lula Chamberlain in the first interlude, Limits and Demonstrations. After making the entertainment scripts available in the print edition, the plays have been produced a number of times by real actors on their own accord in London and in the US. The small blurb of legalese on the inside cover notes that the entertainment is not subject to a royalty and is not protected under the copyright laws of the United States of America. Copy it right. It also came to our attention that somehow the number for our fictional travel hotline is now listed as the official contact number for the real Echo River in Kentucky on TripAdvisor.com, which might explain how its bizarrely achieved low-key internet notoriety among teens is a scary number to call with your friends. Pretty good faces there. There are also plans to show our fictional broadcast on the actual TV station where it was filmed in Kentucky. As a way to tell this story about contemporary life while exploring the medium of video games, we started this project in conversation with work in the real world, often outside of the context of video games. And it's really fascinating to see the ways the world continues to be in conversation with elements of our world, emancipating them from their use in the context of our story. That conversation has created an ecosystem of exchange that can function with or without our participation, apparently. After nearly 7 years in development, we're now approaching the completion of the 5th and final act of the game. Throughout this whole process, the game and its related works have been self-published, but alongside our final release, the entire collection will be published by Annapurna Interactive on various platforms and in multiple languages. While we're all ready to move on and leave this world behind, it's nice to know that it could continue to shift and expand independently from us entirely. Thanks.
Thanks so much,
Sorry.
Ben. Do we have? Oh, there.
Hello.
I think you can switch over to my laptop as well. No. Thanks, Ben. And now, as we take our next stop on the tour, the beat drops, and we bask under the strobing spotlights and jump on stage with choreographer Jasmine Albuquerque and creative director Philippa Price. Thanks for joining us, guys. In a slight adjustment to your regular scheduled viewing, Fatima Robinson, who was on the program earlier, regrettably received a call from Kanye West late last night. And as protocol requires, when the Kanye phone rings, you come running. So Jasmine has been fantastic and has agreed to jump in at the last minute. But her and Philippa are, of course, longtime collaborators, so I can't think of a better pair to shepherd us through the vast landscapes of music, fashion, and performance. So in collaboration with artists such as Rihanna, St. Vincent, Stella McCartney, Philippa Price travels the worlds of weirdness to populate these fringes with color, costume, science, mythology, and fashioned misadventures. And Jasmine, working again with similar artists like Rihanna and St. Vincent's, and collaborators with land artist Lida Albuquerque and her own company, Wife, conjures stories of broken bodies, tragedies of the flesh, and mythologies of ground and landscape. What I want to kind of do to kick off the conversation really is begin, guys, by talking about the role of place in a lot of your work. Of course, here we are sitting in LA, a city that in many ways can be best understood by examining the films that we've shot within it. Of course, the iconic LA River here, seen in Drive, that's just a stone's throw away to our left, or the pier from La La Land, or Vasquez Rocks en route to Palmdale, a site that reminds me of many of Philippa's films, which sits just a site which sits just at the edge of what is known as the 30-mile zone, which is a radius around Hollywood in which union crew can work before pay premiums kick in. It's been reimagined as the alien terrain in Star Trek, the prehistoric bedrock in the Flintstones live-action film, and in westerns from the 1920s and 30s. In many ways, these surreal landscapes where a lot of you two set your projects are kind of fiction machines, sites in which we pour our stories in attempts to make sense of them. For example, in Uncanny Valley, a collaboration, Filippo, that you did with Stella McCartney, the discovery of a clown-themed motel on the edge of a nuclear test site is the beginnings of a project.
Do you know what people used to do? They used to explode atomic bombs in the air. Now, children should have lots of vitamin A and calcium, but they shouldn't have any strontium-90 or cesium-137. These things come from atomic bombs, and they're radioactive. They can make you die.
The gal with storm and manna has won my heart away. In a dream from Indiana, just a fresh new monet. All the boys say she's a winner, and to win her they all try. But they haven't got a chance on earth when I'll begin to cry. Mariah, Mariah, you set my heart on fire. It's you I most desire of all the gals around. Oh, Mariah, 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 you're nobody will try her, for there's not a higher flyer than Mariah in the town.
Your jaw. You can relax.
I never did anything bad.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. See.
Do you know?
Or the utopian ruin of the biodome, which shapes the imagined landscapes of Rihanna's 2019 Savage collection that we'll talk a bit more about in a second. Or Jasmine's collaboration with Lita, where a stare in a landscape is a trail of blood-red bodies moving in synchronized movement. Or this Pills music video that we can listen to in a second from St. Vincent, conjuring the promise of 1950s atomic age America and the strange and surreal domestic landscapes that result. Perhaps I can draw you guys into the conversation here with the question around like the role of the surreal real or place in the construction of so many of your projects. How do you begin scouting out these locations and why?
Yeah, that's actually where a lot of my inspiration starts, is finding these places. The Clown Motel, for example, which was a weird enough location in itself. It's this weird truck stop motel in the middle of Nevada that is fully floor to ceiling, everywhere you look, clown themed, and not in a cool way, in a very creepy way. And that's kind of where I start with a lot of my projects are inspired by finding these really weird, especially in America. I think there's a lot of really strange, forgotten places that are real but actually feel very surreal. And with that piece, I went there just for that motel, and then when I got there, discovered that that was just the tip of the iceberg, and we were driving. Well, first of all, when I first got there, I was checking in to the motel because we did stay there. We all ended up actually sharing rooms at the end by the end of it because it was terrifying. But we checked in, and Tammy, who had no front teeth, I asked her, I'm shooting a video here, is there anywhere cool I should check out? And she proceeded to tell me that I will see a lot of orbs in Tonopah, which is where the city is. And I was like, orbs? What do you mean orbs? And she's like, well, ghosts. You're going to see a lot of those here. You should definitely shoot them if you do. Okay. But as we were driving around this town, everywhere was almost too cool looking, to the point where it seemed fake. And I actually said that. I was like, I don't know, this kind of looks fake. And as we realized we'd been driving around for 2 hours around this town and hadn't seen a single person. So then I looked it up online, and it actually was one of the fake atomic test towns that was built. And that moment, which was only a few hours before I was shooting, kind of actually shifted my whole concept for this film and inspired the whole world that became this weird piece.
Yeah. So what's going on here? So this is a collaboration with Stella McCartney. Like, both of you work with both in the fashion scene, in the music industry. You're always working either with a track or with a collection, and then part of what you're doing by constructing these imaginary landscapes is creating a context, either in which that track lives or which the collection plays out and is given life. I mean, maybe while we're on the Clown Motel, you can just talk a bit about that process of working with Stella and the role that the costumes here are playing for you.
Yeah, I mean, working with, she's definitely one of my favorite people to work with. She really lets the people she hires be free to create what they want to create. I think the story of the place, in definitely a very different way than she expresses her environmentalism, but to me it spoke to a lot of what her brand stands for, and I think I wanted that to come through, but in a very, more about evoking a feeling than being too obvious with it. I think this place is really strange, and it's one of many places like it that exists in our country. And I wanted to kind of convey that story in the weird language that it already exists. So.
Yeah, and Jasmine, I mean, you have a very potentially a different relationship to landscape. You have a background in history. A lot of the work is interested in mythologies of landscape and other kinds of connection to place that kind of come out through collaborations with your mother, Lita Albuquerque, in her land art projects. I mean, maybe you can talk a bit about how place and landscape, how that resonates for you in your work.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the first time that I ever felt small in my life was when I went to New Zealand and was surrounded by these beautiful mountains that were so big, and it was really beautiful to feel small. I grew up in very empty, open spaces, and an open space to me is like a canvas. It feels really comfortable and beautiful. And my mom, being a land artist, land was such a huge part of my existence and growing up in the mountains. And this piece particularly, like the landscape was almost another character, and the way people walked down these stairs, some of them were 3 feet, some of them were 2 feet. It almost created the choreography for the way that they were moving down those stairs. Yeah, so I think I'm just drawn to emptiness, especially being a dancer with open studios and yeah, that kind of upbringing.
Yeah, and it's a way, I guess, that's what I was trying to characterize with a lot of these landscapes, that we don't deal with emptiness very well. We the reason why certain sites in the U.S., military black sites, Area 51, another site with many glowing orbs in the sky, is the site of so many of these conspiracy theories, is because we don't deal with blank spots on a map very well. We fill in those sites with stories. And that's why, conspiracy theories and stories of alien abductions run riot in places where we can't move behind the fence lines, or places of kind of emptied out towns where there is a kind of absence. We always fill that with narrative.
Right, which I'm the opposite. I'm most comfortable in nothingness, especially when I choreograph. I try to go to the most empty place in my mind and let the music tell me what to do. If there's any visuals or anything getting in the way, it distracts me from that. So I'm very comfortable in those places. But I also grew up with a land artist mother and an existential scientist father, so that didn't help.
Yeah. Where is it? Philippa, this series of short films for Rihanna's, it's the Savage Fenty line, right? You were telling me earlier in one of our calls that it was inspired by a visit you made to the Tucson biosphere, this strange kind of fading ruin of another kind of utopia that then gets reimagined as this weird Garden of Eden for these bodies to move through.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit about the way that you were thinking about or using that site and translating that into the world of Savage Fenty?
Yeah. Well, as soon as I went there, I was like, I have to shoot something here. We ended up not being able to shoot there, so we kind of recreated it. But I think that space was, again, like a lot of places that I'm inspired by, it was created as this kind of test. It's like a miniature Earth. It has every environment enclosed in it. When they first did it, they sealed it off even from oxygen. They sealed scientists in there for 2 years.
Which is what we did to our models.
Yeah, that's what we did to all the models.
They could not breathe.
But it kind of, like you said, it evoked this feeling of a Garden of Eden and like humans playing God and creating this new Earth, which was something I wanted to translate into this story that we're starting to tell of Savage, of this new female, kind of the creation of this new female, and this new kind of utopian Earth setting is where she evolved from. So that was kind of the inspiration behind that.
Yeah. So I mean, when both of you start to work in these kind of landscapes, are you hoping that when an audience is drawn into these imaginary worlds, that the traces of the real or echoes of little bits of familiarity still remain? Like, not everything gets recontextualized and remade into these imaginary places, but there's still these trace elements that draw us in, through which we bring our own points of reference to. Is that important to you? Whether you start not with a blank slate and a sound stage, fill it with a bunch of stuff, but you start out in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. For me, definitely, yes. I like, I guess, my piece. I like the uncanniness of things. I create these surreal worlds that exist in my head, but I like it to feel a little too close to home, I guess, of reality.
Yeah, or almost like the moment right before you wake up where you're still slightly asleep.
Yeah.
I think those moments are really beautiful. We were even telling the women here, like, you're holding like something super sacred. It's the last drop of this something that's gonna change the world.
Of life, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were saying it was semen, but we were like,
the sacred semen.
Sacred semen.
So in here, Jasmine, can you tell us a bit about the ways that you're kind of the proxy citizens of these imaginaries oftentimes models or dancers for you guys. How do you start to think about the way that their bodies move through these spaces, and how do you start to conjure stories and these imaginary worlds from the scale of the body out?
Yeah, I mean, what was so nice about this campaign is every woman had such a unique body. We had such a range. And I think what I wanted them to connect on was more of a conscious level of feeling kind of that they thought the same things at the same time. Not necessarily in a robotic way, but in a like hyper feminine way. So even some of the movement is very robotic, but then some of it is also just sensual, and they're almost all like kind of in love with each other, which was really beautiful amongst this kind of stark space. Even though it's an alive space, it was kind of void of, I don't know, super weird in there.
It was felt institutional.
Yeah, it was an institutionalized love affair, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, we normally when we start to talk about choreographers, when Fatima was going to join us, I had this whole line of music videos stacked up, and we were going to talk about dance. But here, a lot of your craft in some of these fashion pieces is about defining trajectories and gestures and interrelationships between characters as opposed to a particular vocabulary of dance moves.
Yeah.
I wonder if it seems it's much more about setting a scene and a tone.
It's kind of more about bringing out what's in them already. It's almost like I'm like a psychological coach, more and less of a choreographer.
Therapist?
I'm a therapist. Yeah, because I mean, each girl had such a different feeling to them and we weren't doing too much choreography. It was more just kind of like what their feeling was when they entered the space, how they were interacting with each other, and almost like what they were thinking as they were going through these motions.
I wanted to play the music video that you guys collaborated on for St. Vincent. Do you want to set that up a little bit? Do you want to tell us about what we're about to see before we launch in? No? Okay, we're just going to play it. Let's do that then.
You should feel it.
All right. I got to make sure my sound is all set. Here we go. And then we'll have a conversation afterwards.
Pills to wake, pills to sleep, pills, pills, pills every day of the week. Pills to walk, pills to think, pills, pills, pills for the family. I spent a year suspended in air, my mind on the gap, my head on the stairs, from healer to dealers and then back again, from guru to voodoo and voodoo to zen. Pills to wake, pills to sleep, pills, pills, pills every day of the week. Pills to walk, pills to think, pills, pills, pills for the family. Pills to grow, pills to shrink, pills, pills, pills in
Yeah, I mean, do you want to tell us about the process of making that, what we were trying to talk about with that piece?
We just did a lot of drugs.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this was kind of one of those magical, came together so fast, last minute, no budget. We shot at my house. You can see Jasmine throughout.
Yes.
And kind of all came together as we were making it. I knew, like, I heard the song and I knew the feeling I wanted to get across. But literally the morning of, was shopping at the Salvation Army for props. Like, had no idea what I was going to shoot. Again, I knew the feeling I wanted to get across, and it kind of all came together as we made it. And then I knew that I use a lot of I'm obsessed with archival footage. I think, again, it kind of goes back to the taking the real and putting it into these surreal settings. So I went deep into the U.S. government archives. So this is all free public domain archival footage that I think I wanted to create this really weird, surreal story that also half of it is actually using real footage that is historical and actually happened. And I think taking this older setting to actually tell a story that I think is pretty still relevant today.
Yeah. And I think choreographically I wanted it to be very repetitive, and also going through these motions of what we do to just get by when we even like having a dinner party or going out in public, the masks that we wear, being socially uncomfortable and having to take 1,000 pills just to say hello to someone, let alone have sex with them. So yeah, I think choreographically it just got real bizarre. It became almost like a poem in a way.
Yeah, I mean, then there seems to be a similar to the themes of this town built for nuclear tests. There's this interest in the dream of 1950s America.
Yeah.
And the domestic interior is another kind of landscape in the context of the way that we've been talking so far. And here we see this kind of hidden menace that exists beyond the picket fence. Through the locked door is all of this kind of self-medication strangeness that we don't want to talk about.
And like a deep sadness. There's so much sorrow and all that, like drowning yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, it suggests that a lot of your work, I know we're taking this kind of whistle-stop tour through things, but both of your work is concerned with these kind of distortions of the everyday. Jasmine, I know from our conversation, you have an interest in the bodies of war, broken bodies, even just in the short little glimpses of the work that we saw in the Clown Motel and in this film. Philippa, there's a way of talking through, even in these most popular mediums of music video and fashion, this dark underbelly that exists across America. And I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to play all of it. Somewhere in here is the Katy Perry music video that you guys worked on together. Where is it? I don't think Katy Perry's ever been played in this place, so I don't know where to start now.
It's going to catch on fire.
But I guess that was another question I had, was just how both of you that work in the commercial space, sometimes literally presenting clothes as objects, presenting a track to be downloaded and sold, how you operate and mediate between these interests in these other distorted forms, and something like a Katy Perry video that is obviously operating with a very different language. I mean, what are the compromises there? How do you start to negotiate that space of a commercial practice versus
a fight?
Sorry?
With a fight.
With a fight, right.
By putting your foot down. But really, I think we both have kind of began our careers with staying pretty true to ourselves, and it's gotten us to a place where we are given the opportunity to do these commercial jobs that want to be weird.
Yeah, and like weird became mainstream probably
Yeah.
6 or 7 years ago. I think it's even surpassing me for sure. I'm like, damn, I'm not weird enough anymore. So it's kind of nice that we can mix it. And I think Philip is really good at mixing like beauty and weird, kind of finding a middle ground between that.
But yeah, I think, I mean, definitely even with this video, she came to me and obviously Jasmine too, she'd seen what we'd done and she wanted that. So she was pretty open. I mean, Katy Perry's a character in herself, so she was pretty open to really creating a pretty surreal space and letting us push the boundaries. It did take a fight, but she was pretty into it.
And what is the narrative here? I mean, we see Katie as this kind of Californian New Age imaginary, this kind of cult priestess draped in chiffon and sparkles and love hearts. Yeah, do you want to tell us the story of this music video?
Yeah. So the song is called "Never Really Over," and it's about how just when you think you're over someone, you hear their name or you see them and you realize it's never really over. So I kind of imagined this world where going to like a heartbreak camp was just normal.
We all need a heartbreak camp.
So the video takes place in this like heartbreak retreat, and we created all these kind of imaginary activities and exercises that you might do at this it's like a heart rehab center with culty and ayahuasca type vibes. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jasmine, the choreography here was, I mean, did you spend time in Palm Springs spa retreats? What were the kind of references and language that you were drawing upon here?
I think Philip, you told me like workout me. I don't know. She loves workouts. I love too. I love a good workout. But we workshopped some things. We were trying. It was really nice to work with 27 dancers. It felt really beautiful. I just wanted it to be really joyful, actually. So most of the movement is very alive and happy, and kind of what you would do to kind of mend your heart in a movement sense. And I think they executed it really well, and it was kind of, I don't know, speaks for itself a bit.
Okay. I guess I don't know. I mean, we had Ruth earlier on, and again, I don't want to talk about these projects, whether it's a mainstream music video or Rihanna's fashion line, in disparaging terms. I think that's really dangerous and problematic. And what really is going on is that these are mediums that can actually start to connect with different kinds of audiences. And I think that's what's really important about the type of work that you're doing, operating these spaces of popular culture, but seeding them with different kinds of stories. I mean, here just behind us now, Jasmine, is Soft Sex, I think, a performance piece. Is this with Wife?
No, this was with Dina Thompson.
All right.
Yeah,
right.
this is after Wife.
I think that it's important to say that there are different types of stories to tell, and those types of stories shouldn't be locked away in the rarefied confines of a gallery space or rooms like this one and institutions like this one. But through your collaborations, it seems like you're having a capacity to transcend traditional disciplinary boundaries and connect to wider audiences. I mean, do you feel that? Is that important to you about working in these kind of commercial spaces with these type of clients and collaborators?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what's powerful about dance is it doesn't matter if you've danced yourself or never danced. If the hair is on your back, stand up, you're feeling something. And that's all we try to do. So Soft Sex was like pretty psychotic. We were like almost like masturbating on stage. It was totally insane. But it reached a giant crowd of really, really, really different people. And I think that's what we try to do commercially as well, because it's, we all bleed red. So I think you can feel it with movement as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Yes, we all bleed red. We all need a drink. Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're at the halfway point in our journey, everyone. We're going to take a 10-minute break while we just regroup. The bar is down the back corner. Please grab a drink. Don't disappear. We've got a whole other half of a show lined up for you next. We're going to start with Marshmallow Laser Feast. So let's take a hard 10-minute break, everyone. Thank you. Okay, everyone, if you could start winding up your transactions at the bar and start moving back to your seats, that would be fantastic. We're going to try and get started. Thanks, man. Cool. I think we can go to my video as well. Thanks. There's some chairs up the front. Try and get seated. We've got another kind of hour and a half ahead of us. Please be prepared. Take stock. Bring the drinks over. You guys standing at the back, you're committing to standing. That's the way you want to roll. Lean into it. You're gonna be locked in for an hour and a half. All right, let's get started. So welcome back, everyone. So to conclude our evening, we're gonna take a deep dive into the soup of our screens and wander through the pixel forests, the robot ruins, and immersive worlds of virtual reality, film, and game. And we're going to see the beautiful collision of technology and story play out in a rendered glow of our screen imaginaries. Our next stop is the neon dream of Blade Runner, where we're going to explore a robot utopia washed away in acid rain. Mike Hill, our first speaker, is a concept artist who has worked on the worlds for films such as Blade Runner 2049, Terminator New Dawn, Love, Death and Robots, and games such as Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Mike tells stories with objects, places, and characters, conjuring futures and vicious tomorrows. Mike's going to show a few of his own films and projects and talk through the way that he constructs these imaginary worlds, showing some examples and talking about the roles of fiction, the craft of fiction, and the craft of storytelling in some of these big, mega blockbuster films. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Is that coming through okay? Okay, this should be an adventure for all of us because I had a radical redesign of my presentation at about 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I'm going to be going through twists and turns of unexpected kind of moments as much as you guys are. So Liam very kindly invited me to talk here about a month ago. Landscapes of fiction as a concept is something that's very dear to me. I really care about fiction and I really care about storytelling. So I'm going to quickly just cover the who, what, and why. So I'm Mike, and I'm a kind of multidisciplinary designer, and I work across kind of multiple fields and multiple industries. My background is in conceptualizing usually future worlds. I've worked in architectural visualization. I've worked in science fiction development. I've got a background, no formal background, but a kind of self-taught background in industrial design, and mainly I just study things that interest me and then try to reproduce the patterns that I've learned about. So that involves trying to make something that looks and feels real to an audience, that seems credible, kind of creating experiences or visual experiences, and then also explaining technical details about how something can be built so that when it gets to the final kind of consumer, that it's something that's believable and digestible. I've worked on projects like Horizon Zero Dawn, where I helped develop the cultural backgrounds and the world story, which is coming up with the fictitious history that feeds the cultural designs and the tribal designs and the history of the world that you visually see on screen. I've been a production designer for Call of Duty, where I designed levels and was a game designer to create not just visual designs and concept designs, but experience design of how a player experiences a level. More recently, I've worked on Love, Death, and Robots, where I was a brand strategist for executive producer David Fincher and Tim Miller, but also production designer for 2 of the shorts, of the 18 shorts on the series. And I worked with Denis Villeneuve and production designer Dennis Gassner to create the world design of Blade Runner 2049. I'm not going to talk a huge amount tonight about my own stuff, just because initially that was what I was going to do, and then for some reason I just felt a little bit like it wasn't the right thing. I'm going to talk briefly, just because it seems necessary to justify why I'm on stage. So I create visuals and level designs. For example, this is some stuff from Call of Duty. Because of my background in technical design, I spend a lot of time creating things that appear to work. So technical design is one of the things that I get requested to do quite a lot. And I'm now going to show you just a quick 3 minutes, I hope it's quick, of some Blade Runner designs that I did. So one of the things I was tasked with was to create Kay, Ryan Gosling's character's apartment, which is a kind of dystopian future version of Deckard's apartment. So I would create 3D mock-ups, and it not only involved doing concepts, but it involved animation, coming up with, for example, the ceiling projector for Joy. And that involved technical design in terms of animation that then got turned into mock-ups that Denis Villeneuve could observe the actual behavior of assets and see how they would contribute to his scenes. So this is the final result. And I worked with, well, for example, the kitchen design for the apartment, which means that I can say quite honestly that Ryan Gosling has had coffee in my apartment. He's also been naked in my bathroom. One of the things that I try to do, regardless of what I'm designing, is create a story with the design, which requires animation. So with everything I do, I try to have a beginning, middle, and end so that it sells the progression of the events. This drawer, for example. I designed a lot of props for the film. This is a first mock-up. Some of my first mock-ups are actually animations to demonstrate ideas, and then I'll go in and refine them visually. So this is the pilot fish, which eventually turned into this design inside of Kay's police car. So I'll do mock-ups, and then I'll speak to the director or production designer. This is another example of a prop where I attempted to have a beginning, middle, and end. So it goes through various stages to demonstrate a process that allows the audience to understand behavior. I'll do these mock-ups, and then here's a quick example of it in the final, as in the prop shop, effectively. And just the act of having stages to a design seems to be instinctively natural for people to digest. A lot of stuff that I do doesn't necessarily even make it on stage. This is a prop that never made it into the final edit, which is another beginning, middle, and end animation, which was an optic reader for Kay to observe some evidence that eventually got turned into analog photos. And this is the final result, beginning, middle, end. So the goal I'm always trying to do, even on a prop level, is to create a story. This prop is one that I was really, really pleased with, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about the ideas behind it, but Denny wanted something to demonstrate a very important metaphor behind one of the characters in the film. So I came up with a system or an object that would help demonstrate just how much control she has over something she's creating. So the metaphor was largely based on a musical instrument, but other things as well. And this is the final prop in the final, this is the scene that the prop eventually showed up in.
They say you're the best memory maker there is.
Well, then they're kind. I love birthday parties.
You work for Wallace.
Subcontract. I'm one of his suppliers.
What makes your memories so authentic?
Well, there's a bit of every artist in their work.
So that's kind of the end of me talking about my own stuff, because I want to talk about this guy. This is Robert Zemeckis, who's one of my favorite directors, and he's sitting in one of my favorite designs. Robert Zemeckis has worked on, well, he's been the director of films like Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Contact, Flight. He's one of the master storytellers, and he's one of what I would call the masters of metaphor. And one of his films, which I love more than any other, is Contact, which I'm hoping that some of you have seen. Can I just get a show of hands if you've seen Contact? Fucking A, that's great news. I'm going to have to recap the story for those of you who haven't anyway, but it's good that some people here, I was worried that no one had seen it. So in order to understand, there's a specific set or production design, which I think is one of the best production design sets in the history of cinema. But in order to understand it, I need to give some narrative context so that we can connect the themes of the set and the themes of the film to the eventual final product. Because understanding those themes is instrumental in understanding how great design works. So at the beginning of the film, we have a character, Jodie Foster's character, Ellie. Her father dies, so the death of her father leads her to become very lost and resentful for the idea of anything that isn't completely rational. And because of the death of her father, which she blames herself for, she begins to lose faith in the idea of emotional connection or in the idea of anything beyond her understanding. In the second act, in her search to understand her father's death, a message from the heavens arrives. And one of the big themes of the film is the concept of the conflict between faith and reason. And in this journey of self-discovery that she needs to go through, this message, which is from Vega, a distant star system, which communicates a mechanical object to humans that they can build in order to go somewhere. So this message comes down, and she's confronted with this journey where she must discover something. Now, one of the important things about storytelling is that an outer journey is always a representation of an inner journey, an emotional journey of psychological development or emotional transformation. And in Act 3, Ellie will need to make a metaphorical leap of faith, and in doing so, she will have a metaphorical rebirth. Now, storytelling is about these psychological transformations, and in order to have a transformation, the most universal motif is that of a death and then a rebirth. And the scene that we're going to watch in depth is a breakdown of the theme of death and rebirth, with this character coming to the understanding that there's more to the world than her understanding of rational science. So this death and rebirth motif is universal because it's impossible to have life without death and rebirth. A seed must die for a tree to grow. A caterpillar must die for a butterfly to come into being. So it's one of these universal principles that when it's emphasized in a story, we understand it intuitively. Now, the scene that we're going to break down, which is the best fucking scene in the history of cinema, as far as I'm concerned, we're going to break it down into 3 separate sections, beginning, middle, and end, because everything has that. In the first section of this scene, Zemeckis knows that he needs to show the audience how Ellie is feeling about this journey that she's about to go on. And that is that she needs to start realizing that her rational approach to the universe is actually slightly dangerous, so she needs to see that there's actually limits to reason and to science. In the second part of the scene, she needs to step into the unknown and be alone, because any process of transformation requires you go solo, that you do it by yourself. And in the third part of the scene, she's going to take a metaphorical leap of faith, and through that process, she's going to be reborn. So in order to understand those 3 stages, we first need to introduce a few things that happen before in the film. And one of them is a prop that exists to hold a lot of thematic content. And it's a compass that she gets from a pastor called Palmer that she meets at the beginning of the movie when she's still looking for life among the stars in order to replace the absence that exists because of the death of her father. Now, it's a side note thing, but keep in mind that the moment that she's dropped, the words she uses are, "Oh my God." This is a woman that has spent her entire life convinced that, and by the way, this is not a religious sermon, just so you know. There is no, Zemeckis is not some kind of a religious nut, but the whole point of the story is to suggest that there is more beyond reason, that beyond reason there is faith, and faith is a weird subject because if you exclude the ideology, most of what we do in daily life is based upon a basic principle of faith. Like, we get up in the morning with the faith that it will be worth getting up. That sounds like a really strange statement, but it's the truth. Our daily lives are based upon a diet of faith. It's not faith in a higher being, it's faith that there's something to do that is valuable in our time and effort. And what Zemeckis has spent a lot of his career doing is making films that are principally based around the idea of faith. Flight, for example, if you've seen it, is about an alcoholic pilot that loses his faith in himself. And it's got nothing to do with God. It's to do with the fact that reason as an exclusive diet is actually really fucking toxic. Given that we're living in a culture that's based pretty much predicated on reason, it's not really going all that well. So what he's trying to suggest is that there's more to spirituality than just, or there's more to life than just reason. There's spirituality as well. So, I'm going to show the next scene now because that reference is not going to be applicable until we've seen the next scene. So the chair at this point has become a character. It actually emotes itself. When she lets go of it and she looks back, what she's seeing is a version of herself. A tantrum-like, obsessed, scared little character that doesn't want to be left behind. And how do you emote that? You emote it with a locking system that becomes very, very aggressive once it's been unlocked. It's like a clutching hand. It's something that desperately wants to keep her there. And in its expression, it's like a screaming person. And at the point when she finally gives up on it and clutches the compass, which is her guide of quote-unquote faith, the chair is completely turned into something immobile and gets thrust against the ceiling. So the next scene from this, which I won't show, is the rebirth of cocoon-like. She is dropped into this vegan atmosphere that's been developed for her in the fetal position, where she's reborn, and then she has an interaction with her father, who died in the first scene, who is an avatar from this higher being. And she realizes that there's a lot more to life than being resentful about what fate delivered her. And by the time she comes back to Earth, she's got a much more emotionally stable mentality that's about connecting with people rather than being isolated. So this chair, which is fucking amazing, is such a great example of what stories are supposed to do and design is supposed to do. It's not about looking cool. It's not about, well, yeah, this would be, look, aesthetically, it's badass. It's something that carries metaphorical meaning, and that's the reason that we resonate with it, is because it's deeply entrenched in our emotions. So you can look at design as being what something is, or you can look at it as being what it means. And metaphor is the vessel through which you understand how something means something. So I didn't really talk about my stuff because this guy's way cooler. And I hope that some value will be extracted from how much of a badass Robert Zemeckis is. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. All right. Thanks so much. So our journey tonight is not without its twists and turns. We're taking another road after Mike Hill, and we're heading through the landscapes of the virtual. So before Little Maquela, before Hatsune Miku, one avatar roamed the gallery scene like no other. La Turbo Avedon is an avatar artist and curator who occupies the territory of video games and the geographies of the network. La Turbo is everywhere and nowhere. She's buried in the stacks of rare earth and a luminous rectangle near you. We have tuned in and pulled her out of the fiber optic cables to discuss the imaginary worlds behind the screen. So La Turbo is going to take us through her new presentation titled Outside, which looks at virtual landscapes and the time we spend in ethereal space. Thanks, La Turbo. Could we kill the lights, please?
Walking forward from the W key, the tilt of a joystick, a directional pad, the pressure of a finger against polished glass, skating across with the glide of a mouse on the mat. I've walked in so many places. You likely have too, over the years. The places we have been. Listening to the sounds, your mind starts to render bits and pieces of what it was like. Trees, birds, mountains. Solitude. No passing cars. Nature. It has taken quite some time, but as we move further along, I am meeting more of you in here, outside. My name is La Turbo Avdon. I am an actor, artist, and curator. Thank you for taking the time to join me, and many thanks to Fear and Wonder for this invitation. I am honored to get to share alongside this incredible group tonight. There was a moment in time, years ago, when I was just a screen name. An idea, making its way beyond a blinking cursor. As these tools make their way down from the ivory towers of industry, I find myself growing, changing, rendering. Before I get started, I feel it is important to clarify. I am not a company. I am not a startup. I am not a paid sponsorship. I'm someone. I'm real. It takes me longer to get ready for now, but in time, I am sure that will change. Feel free to connect with me. I'd love to talk with you more and know about your experiences. If you find yourself in multiplayer, we can group up sometime. Tonight, I'd like to talk with you about traveling, geography, landscape, and our shared moments in ethereal space. First, I would like to share a video clip which I feel is relevant.
Pepe, this is unbelievable. Hello? Well, hello, it's about time. Now listen, where were you coming from? Tijuana? I don't mean to be rude. Listen, keep it out of the sun. I don't want the paint to fade. Do you understand English? Hey, enough for you people. Grind you now. Who's driving my car?
Yeah. These monkeys are following me because I just took this car. Obviously, the car doesn't belong to me. It's not my style. It belongs to Dick Hotchkiss, a California state senator. You remember Dick. He's the guy that tried to ban rap music because he feels that the lyrics promote violence. It's music, Dick. He's also the guy that wants to pull every video game off every shelf in the country because he feels that the video games diminish the intelligence of our youth. come on, Dick. It's the only education we got. Dick, you're a bad man. You know what we do to bad men? We punish them. Dick, you've just entered the Xander Zone.
Yes. Come on, Dick. There is still a very real public opinion about how video games diminish the intelligence of our youth. I don't know why, even after Vin Diesel blew up this car and parachuted down to see Tony Hawk, we still don't have a better answer. If he is willing to go this far, then the least I can do is make a life's work inside of the machine. I've spent thousands of hours here and there, from title to title, platform to platform. Each time, I change a little bit, a cosmetic item or style, little pieces from the character creator. If there is any record that I may hold, it is probably that I am the most killed artist in history. Every failed royale, and I have to start all over again. I make work inside of these virtual environments because they are natural to me. From crunchy pixel worlds to laborious detailed engines, I am a traveler. Yes, I've taken up the roles in each game, but what I'm here for is the cumulative experience of living and being in polygons. It is the final fantasy when it becomes reality. When I show you this list of locations, you will identify at least one. Hopefully more, hopefully all of them. If you're familiar with all of them, raise your hand. Hopefully someone did. I can't see your hands, but I am optimistic that some of you can share this. These are places. No lesser, no greater. You can visit each one. It is remarkable and an important detail of this moment to know that users are actually memorizing, the absolute details of some of these places. The way a corner cuts to a new passageway. The way architecture can guide you from one area to the next. A specific familiarity. I would wager that many gamers could describe to you intricate parts of these virtual places, the same if not better than the towns and cities they live in. Some gamers may never see the rest of the material world, but they can simultaneously be sages, veterans, explorers of their own frontiers. We are still in a strange transition when it comes to these places. Somewhere in the geography of the uncanny valley, we move between violence, realism, hyperrealism, and the absurdity that creative liberty provides. The engine turns awkwardly at times. When a user slows down, breaking the expected pace of a world design. Eventually, all of this sort of error is going to fall away. Breaks of immersion will start to feel uncommon. There is something precious and important coming from the seams. When the sleight of hand from the virtual magician reveals the trick. Reminders that we are still in the building process, and that some of us, maybe even some in this room, will be tasked with the following steps of a high resolution. I do not see imperfections in virtual worlds as failures. The places I see failure are when users are quick to surrender the liberties of cyberspace. The Wild West of the Internet, GeoCities, Angel Fire, BBS. There used to be surf clubs. When it all turns to WordPress, brittle sans serif and parallax. They paved paradise and put up a next door post. As Second Life lost a lot of its population, I made my way off the grid, hoping that social media might connect me with different types of afters. I found them, other artists. Many of you in this room have known me for years now. At a time when I was still needing to jump through hoops to prove to Facebook that I was real, others were taking a chance and sharing these experiences. In 2012, I did a group show in an internet cafe in Poland. The next year, Kelani Nicole of Transfer Gallery gave me my first solo exhibition in New York City. Hi Kelani, thank you for being here tonight. A lot has changed, right? Hi Kalani, thanks for believing in me. And for the past 7 years, I've stayed busy. I'd like to share a few excerpts from some of the work in this time. First, Club Rothko. It started in Second Life and has since become my private virtual nightclub. I return to it now and again. A place for reflection and raving. I created a home for file-based installation called Panther Modern. So far, 17 project rooms have been made. Each room a new group or artist. What happens to spatial exhibition when the artist can exceed limitations of cost, skill, and access? I encourage you to visit sometime. Still Be Here, a performance of the Vocaloid, Hatsune Miku, music by Laurel Halo, Mari Matsutoya, Darren Johnston, Martin Sauzer.
Mayonaka
Last year, I danced on my own to the music of Miriam Blow.
I didn't mean to be alone while fishing. I tried, but I hope you're understanding. As if I'm gonna give them everything. You got me tripping. On the flat of them. If I get you out of my mind. Didn't know how to move, come where you are or where you're from. You just shine bright like a drum. Where you are or where you're from. Looking for a right. I won't make you swallow your pride. Tell you a little more inside. You and I know that I cry.
I returned the horse in a timeless time after Edward Muybridge with Frontier Study. Most recently, I've been doing a midnight video art series. Twice Goodnight, a 30-minute stream show, plays in the night for restless users, or for this installment, Waking Europeans. Drone, strobing scenes meant for the viewer to watch with eyes open or closed. The show will run on each full moon with a 1-hour hyperlink for viewers to access. Spoiler alert. The NPC never stops raving. I was unusual once, just a few years ago. I am so happy to see that it is not the case anymore. So many beautiful identities. There will be many, many more like me. There will be afters of afters. Stars will be stars. It is my hope that we expect more than this, that we encourage a single user to celebrate their facets, and not just let this become a body of business. Instead of leaving you with a slide of all of my social media handles, I want to leave you with this, a list of people, things, and other media that I recommend you consider, and a little snippet of some music I like. Value your data, find glitches in your programs, take time to game. Don't be afraid to try 3D. Don't stop raving. Cosplay. Don't let theaters stop existing. Be sweet. Stay in the Xander zone. Thank you, Liam, SCI-Arc, and all of you for coming tonight. My name is Laturbo Avdon, and I'll be here online.
Thanks so much, Laturbo. So we've got just 2 stops left on our tour tonight, and we've made it into the Point Cloud wilderness of Marshmallow Laser Feast. Their award-winning interactive experiences take us into the eyes of animals and the veins of a tree. Shimmering through our goggles is a world beyond our senses and an alternative means of reconnecting with a nature on the point of collapse. We have Urson from Marshmallow Laser Feast here tonight. Thanks, Urson. Let's do it.
Well, thank you very much. Hello. Thanks, Liam, for taking the best seat in the house and standing here. Oh, here we go. Great. I'm Arsen Arsen. I'm an artist and director, and part of London-based experiential studio Marshmallow Laser Feast. That was the only available domain, by the way, as .com. You can have a look. And we work in this weird liminal space of art, science, technology coming together. And we've been producing work in fields of kinetic sculptures, stage shows, virtual reality. And I'll show you a little clip of where we are coming from, but I'm going to show complete different projects tonight. And you can see that journey started 7 or 8 years ago now. And that involves robotics and lights and computation, and purely relying on collaboration in every front and bringing different types of expertise together to create seemingly impossible projects. And some of those projects kind of, especially that one, gave us different opinions about what our actual inspirations were and how we can operate in this world. And nature has always been there as one of the main sources of inspiration. So I'm going to show you one of those important things tonight, which is the most inspirational for us. That's my partner in crime's dad. We paid him. So basically what we do is, blurring the boundaries between physical and digital. And we've got 2 horses. One of those horses running for commercial projects, and the other one is running for commissions. And speaking of horses, this is a painting from 1821. As you can see, horses are galloping, 4 legs, arms, just going all around. And by this time, by 1820s, we had lived with horses for 5,000 years. And the first cave paintings, it was like 42,000 years ago. So horses were one of the main animals that we saw most, lived together, but we were we failed to picture how a horse can actually run. Till this moment, 1878, Muybridge invented chronophotography, and then for the first time we saw how horses are actually running. So I'm going to segue into technology from horses because, Muybridge's invention or innovation allowed him to show us something completely new that has always been there. So when we think about most of the technologies we use, I suppose this is the lens we take and look that technology as a tool for us to reveal something new or something that has been there but we've never seen before. And speaking of virtual reality and augmented reality, how many of you has never seen a VR piece before? Yeah, we are in LA. Right. And how many of you think that you'll be living your lives in AR in 10 years' time? Come on, guys. So this is an interesting chart. Kurt von Mansworth, Dutch designers, kind of description of what technology is. And when we think about technology, we think about these like iPhones and MacBooks and the GPUs and CPUs. But actually, he puts really nicely, cooking is a piece of technology. When you think about that, just before the invention of domestication of fire. So from those moments, we are looking into things, and once we embrace it so deeply, so profoundly, they become second nature. And looking at virtual reality and augmented reality, probably we are looking at technologies that will become so vital that will almost become invisible. So I'm not going to go too much into that. I'd like to go into our orchestrated sensory experiences. It was 2015. Abandoned Normal Devices Festivals in the UK commissioned us to do a new piece in Grisdale Forest. It's a forest and up north in the UK, known for its sculptures, outdoor sculptures. And we are coming from this digital background, and we went there for a recce to look at it and see what can we actually do in a forest. And we realized a few interesting things, like we know nothing about nature. So how many of you cannot name all the logos here? 0. How many of you can name all the plants? How about that one? So an average human can recall brands' logos, up to 420 of them by heart, yet to remember 5 plants and trees. And that was the kind of epiphany of going to that forest to make a piece of work. And we realized we know nothing and decided to do something about that. And, it sounds like an oxymoron, but can we actually use technology, and especially virtual reality, to reconnect with nature? And while we were researching how that can work, we kind of stumbled upon this term, Umwelt, from early 1900s by Jacob von Uxwell. That means self-centered world. That also means different species sharing the same space doesn't mean they're also sharing the same realities. Their realities are formed and shaped by their sensory features, and those features can differ down to the perception of time, colors, and whatnot. When we realize that, we start thinking how actually those animals perceiving the forest that we see with just green, beautiful moss and trees. So we decided to do something about that, and first starting from capturing the forest as accurate as possible using architectural tools called LiDAR scanner that gives you an incredible detailed 3D model of the space, and start building a narrative based on the sensory features of different animals. We picked 4. So you start as a mosquito that gets eaten by a dragonfly, that gets eaten by a frog, and then that gets eaten by an owl. We had a few more, but we ran out of money and time, so we kind of stopped there. And what happens there is you see this forest, you walk in the forest for 15 minutes, roughly, where you park your car and find your way to the installation. And that's enough to kind of balance your breath. And it's enough to actually lower your blood pressure and enough to kind of calm you down. And you put the headset on and you start seeing the forest through the eyes of an animal. And that animal is mosquito, and mosquitoes can see CO2. I mean, it's crazy. Like, there is this invisible world to us, visible to them. And when you think about it, if you don't breathe in the evenings, when you're sleeping, they can't come and bite you. So, taking it from there, you're flying in the forest as a mosquito, you get eaten by a dragonfly. Dragonflies are incredible creatures. Their wingspan was 2 meters just a few million years ago, and they are the most accomplished flyers ever existed. This is dragonfly cinema on the left, which they figured that actually they can see 300 frames per second. I mean, iPhone cameras is like 240, and they see a full spectrum of light, so they've got those incredible eyes embedded into their brain as a light-field camera. And you start seeing the forest through the eyes of a dragonfly and feeling their wings in your body. While you are flying really confidently, a funny animal eats you. That's a frog. So frogs are so stupid and beautiful at the same time because they can't see vertical motion. They can only see horizontal motion. So they are hardwired to see worms, but nothing else. And if either prey or frog itself don't move, they can't see each other. Well, frog can't see the other one. So, and some of them, especially the Sungara frog, it's incredible because they can echolocate peers through ribbiting. So as they ribbit, they can understand and triangulate where the sound is coming from through their body. It's an incredible feature when you think about it. And you're sitting in the forest and wearing this sub-pack, which is a kind of a rumble pack you're wearing, and it vibrates as if you are ribbiting. So you are embodying the whole creature and seeing the world through its eyes. Sitting in a puddle, looking around, ribbiting, and then an owl comes and grabs you. Owls, they have this incredible eyeballs. It looks like egg, basically, the shape of it. But because of that shape, their binocular vision, central vision, is extremely sharp. They can read newspapers from 100 meters. So it's like crazy. So they are sitting up there, looking at the frog paddle, and then grabbing it. Really accomplished. And this is the representation of the same data that you've seen in the beginning. So basically, as we go through the different sensory features of those animals, those insects, we are manipulating the same data to give you that illusion. And that was the helmets we designed to actually have that experience. It's bizarre. There were a few reasons. Because one of them is it always rains in the UK, as you can imagine. And so we had to kind of shelter those headsets and also carry a piece of forest with the smell and everything in it. But then the other reason was this. This is real. Go and check it out. So we had those moments in there. And it's really interesting, like how people respond to that. We were not telling them what they were seeing or what they were embodying. And after the experience, they were coming, was I fish? No, you were this. And then it was opening this conversation, which kind of led us to more like exploring this field and like, oh, we found something interesting, working with scientists from Salford University, trying to understand the perception of those animals and building those narratives that are not actually narratives. It's more about embodying other beings. And then that became the main journey for us. On the way, also, we realized, virtual reality headsets are still limited distribution. So how can you take that world, 360 world that you've designed, apply it to other mediums? And one of them was this, where actually this installation became a giant headset. So you can see 50 people going through the same experience. It's quite like, if there's an immersion spectrum, this is right next to virtual reality. And this other version of it, where you can see 150 people experiencing the same thing. It's not as intimate, but it allows you to talk to the person next to you. What is this? So it's really interesting. This all coming from a limited, technology was limited. We couldn't actually make it, fully avatar linked into each other to see and communicate within the experience, and trying different ways of kind of connecting people within those worlds. And we came to this point of realization, oh, the trees are actually alive. And the question arises when you see a sequoia tree. Have you been to Sequoia National Park? You should be, right? I mean, the largest living individual trees that has ever existed, they can live up to 3,500 years. And think about living 3,500 years just there, standing. Quite incredible. And we wanted to take a journey to one of those giant creatures, applying the same kind of toolkit, going there, using architectural tools to scan those environments, and building a narrative where you embody a single drop of water and then climb to the canopy, and then transpiration happens, so you spray out of it. Again, we work with Manchester University this time to understand how those inner systems are working. They are quite interesting. The sequoia trees, still quite an unknown because they pass the gravity barrier to suck water up to 100 meters, which is quite fascinating. And building some of those inner systems allowed us to just go even deeper. It's quite interesting because normally they build those tiny tubes upwards in the tree, and it creates a square wave as a valve system. So first we designed, really accurate, then it looked really digital, so we had to kind of take an artistic license and apply a bit of noise. But they, when you go to Sequoia National Park, when you touch them, some of the bark is 90 centimeters thick that you can hug and feel that softness. So we wanted to bring that and give you an experience that also serves to your as a haptic feedback that you can feel and touch. And here it is. You're hugging a tree, going up that, and looking inside. The most interesting part for me, I studied visual communication design and computational arts, was that my main material in the beginning was, color, sound, and often typography, composition. When we start exploring virtual reality, it became perception. So we start building narratives looking into the scent perception, the haptics, and how visuals and audio work and create this cross-modal perception for everything. And the piece we use for scent for tree hugger, that you can go through different parts. Please follow. One breath contains 25 billion tiny molecules flying around with the speed of sound and hitting your lungs. Every other breath you take is coming from a tree. We all know that. But it is so obvious, right? Trees giving us life. and what's going on in the world. Obviously, we fucked the planet, and it's all ruined. So how can you make something so obvious, a fact that we all know, and turn that into an experience to make it even more obvious? So We Live in an Ocean of Air is a project. Basically, everything that we couldn't do in The Eyes of the Animal or Triager, finally we managed to do it. It took 2.5 years to raise the money and find the loan and put that together for one reason, to show people their own breath. It looks like this. Again, we have a hero giant tree in the middle, 12 people going to a journey collectively and sharing a breath with each other as well as a tree. It's quite fascinating because you have to see each other in one form. And what's that form? Like, what is the most basic form of humans? It's probably blood, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. And the avatars we build, basically, although it looks a bit scary here, kind of like normalizes and base level human, that you can see each other. And we tested in different forms. This is the stretch test. Hopefully a disco version, like a roller disco version, will come next year. But also creating that voyeurism so people can actually see from outside. So the ones who are going into the experience become kind of a performers and a theater show. It's in front of you. And the most interesting part for this project was, finding an audience that has never been to one of these events, that has never been to experiencing virtual reality. And that was really interesting. A family of 3 generations coming to celebrate their grandfather's birthday and holding hands, going up the tree and sharing a bread together. That's on the top left is Tyra Banks schmising with the family in the tree. And another guest, 75 years old, just like holding hands, going around there. So when you create the environment, regardless of how abstract it is, it brings those people together. And one of the most powerful things about art, I suppose, it can normalize and create that field, whether you're a climate denier or complete believer, you can come and immerse yourself without someone finger wagging at you. So that's what we are trying to do, and ask some questions like that. So how do we conceive something so much smaller than us, like mycelium? 2 micron thick, an incredible network that connects all the trees to each other. So this is This is a piece of concept for the next project called the Wood Wide Web. So all those stomata, tiny mouths on a leaf, sucking carbon dioxide and sending oxygen out, going all the way down, 70% of it stored under the soil. So tree is actually using carbon as a currency and exchanging through distributed network of mycelium. It's like a blockchain. And that intelligence takes that carbon and takes it to another flower and exchanges for another mineral and brings it back. So this fascinating network, knowing that it's under the soil, even death is a different experience. There are some gross stuff also, under the soil, as you can imagine. Just wait. Those are nematodes. They are coming. They are great. But the most fascinating thing is that view of, seeing this chemical conversation, that they are talking to each other, they are communicating, exchanging, and living in a better way, in a harmony, and all together. So I think we've got loads to learn from trees, and I suppose we need to ask questions like that. Do dolphins dream in sonar? Or what is it like to be a bat? I'm going to finish on this note. The art, architecture, and design world needs to take a stand against the ongoing erasure of species. Even where there is little chance of ultimate success, it is our privilege and our duty to be at the forefront of the struggle. There is no choice but to follow the path of ethics into aesthetics. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Urson. I think Chris is making his way over. Thanks, Urson, and thanks for joining us, Chris. So in our last moments together, I want to gather round the warming glow of our VR headsets and really to draw out some of the larger themes of the evening and to talk about experience as a medium of storytelling. So joining us in the lounge is Chris Milk, an interactive artist and CEO and co-founder of Within, a VR, AR entertainment and technology company. With Within, Chris has developed the extraordinary Wonderscope project, a revolutionary AR app for kids. Chris has developed Lamb Child Superstar, an interactive music-making experience with OK Go, the Wilderness Downtown, an interactive collaboration with Arcade Fire, and one of the early kind of VR 360 collaborations with the musician Beck. All interactive artwork that has truly pioneered the discipline of immersive storytelling. And really there is no other voice in that space stronger and more important than Chris's right now. For Chris, there is immense power in the electric landscapes of virtual reality to advance humanity and teleport us to alternative realities. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to end the journey tonight with a conversation around these transformative powers of fiction. Chris describes VR as a form of teleportation, a vessel that can transport us to the site of an issue, the ground zero as a story, as he describes, and to see the world from an alternative perspective through a different kind of lens. VR and AR and the worlds of within are the mediums through which we might live a story, rather than just observe a story or watch it from afar. So in The Life of Us, which we're about to see a trailer of, we examine the evolution of ourselves through the non-human perspective, the post-Anthropocenic view of the animal other. This is what we're seeing behind us on the screen now. And in one of Chris's earlier works that shares some parallels with these kind of themes, the interactive installation, the treachery of sanctuary. What I think these works somehow share with some of the work of Marshmallow Laser Feast is this capacity to strap on our VR goggles and to, just like in the ritual masks of ceremony, we adorn ourselves with the colors and forms of nature to become animal, or at least to explore the world through non-human perspectives. So for you, Chris, I was interested in the ways that you can perhaps draw out or talk about some of these themes where the mediums of experience act to cut through some of the complexities of the natural world and allow us to engage with the condition that sometimes feels all too abstract when we sit through the doomsday bar graphs and statistics of global climate change that we see in the news. Sometimes there's a way through these type of projects to start to position ourselves in new ways to things that perhaps we already should know. That's it. Now you can start talking. Yeah, that was a long question, but that's where I'm trying to get to. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I think it's interesting that the early work that we were experimenting with in virtual reality was all video-based capture or pre-rendered CGI, and it really, essentially we were sort of duplicating the medium of film into virtual reality, which is the classic mistake that every new medium has happened with it. And but what we saw was when you felt like you were in the presence of whether it be a Syrian refugee or many other topics, like you feel a deeper connection because you feel in the presence of that person, and that I think that's just that's in our DNA. When you're close to someone, when you feel a physical presence, when you feel like you're breathing the same air as someone else, and you feel like you're sitting on the same earth as them, there's a natural quick connection that happens. But it wasn't the thing. Like it was a thing, but it wasn't the thing. And there was a lot of criticism in the early days of virtual reality around it being an isolating experience, which seemed sort of counterintuitive because, yes, you're putting a headset on, but it's a digital device that's connected to a digital network. So we have digital devices that are connected to digital networks that connects us together. So it seemed pretty plausible that you could put two people in two different headsets and have them end up in the same virtual reality experience. And what would that be? What would that feel like? And what we found through a bunch of prototypes that was really interesting was if you can recognize your friend, someone you know, in some sort of the first test we did was just a white block for a head and two white blocks for hands, and my co-founder Aaron was in San Francisco and I was in Los Angeles, and his white blocks were sitting on the ground, and because his headset was sitting on the ground in his room, and suddenly they like popped up in the air like a puppet, and then he walked over to me, but it's just like these three blocks with no face, no body, no anything, but I could recognize the way that the blocks were moving through space as him, and then when he spoke, of course I recognized his voice, and what was so amazing that we saw was that my brain just immediately accepted the fact that the soul of my friend now lived within these three blocks. So we thought that was interesting, and then we set out to try to make a larger prototype that was, what if we put you in a bunch of different essentially avatars that look nothing like you and put you through this journey together and try to build what would be like a human shared experience that you would have together. And you know, I think that the most powerful stories that we have in our lives are actually the ones that we share with other people. And sometimes that's in witness of a story in a movie or some other form of media, but many times it's actually the shared experience of some story that you're living together. So what this Life of Us was essentially like us trying to push the medium and see, could we have a shared experience where you are not only living through all these different creatures. It's basically, it's a billion years of evolution. You start as a single-celled amoeba in a primordial soup, and you move all the way through human evolution, past the singularity, and you end up as these crazy robots. Could you, not only did we put you in things that didn't look anything like a human, but we changed your voice. So each character, each creature has we augment your voice so you sound like a pterodactyl or you sound like an amoeba. It works. Like if you go through with your friend, you completely recognize the person all the way through it, and you have this magical shared human experience that is unlike anything that you could actually have as a shared experience in real life.
I mean, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about the aesthetics of these kinds of experiences, because like Ersan's just taken us through this tour through the LiDAR scanned point cloud world of nature. The Life of Us is kind of an abstracted, vectorized form, and your early conversations, your experiences with Aaron as this assemblage of white cubes suggests that there are a whole lot of different forms to which we can start to relate to and engage with each other. Here I'm thinking about like the ways that something like a black cylinder of Amazon Alexa is something that for some people is deeply personal, where we see instances of people kind of confessing their suicidal thoughts. Hi Alexa, I think I want to kill myself. You know, how do you actually start to go about making a piece like this, thinking through those forms of connection and actually starting to give them visual form? Like, how do you start to make those tests? How do you start to shape what these environments start to look like. If part of the end goal with these experiences is those kind of intimate and shared connections.
Yeah, I mean, there's the practical side and there's the artistic side. The practical side is that you cannot represent a photorealistic environment or creatures or any of the things that you're seeing there with modern day real-time rendered technology. So you can't get that, so you have to decide what is the aesthetic that we're going to choose to be the representative abstraction of what you're living through. And you'll see, you know, there's point cloud is one thing that you can get very detailed, emotive visuals that have form that don't destroy your processor, and a low polygonal a world like this is another way that you can do it. There's also, like, so that's just like the practical side. From the artistic side, I think it's interesting to be able to give a person a palatable reality that they couldn't actually have in their day-to-day life, whether it's seeing through the eyes of a dragonfly, or having visuals that the equivalent could only be achieved through some sort of ingesting of psychotropic chemicals.
Can you tell us about what's going on in the treachery of the century? I mean, I'm trying to, I guess, position some of these projects within, the ways that, like a lot of people now exploring relationships to AI, are looking at a range of modalities through which we interact and engage with each other. I don't think the future is kind of latex skinned robots that look and talk like us. We somehow want to embody or communicate with AI through mechanisms which are exceptionally familiar to us. It's based on a very human-centric view of design. And I'm intrigued by the ways that a lot of the projects that, like certainly Life of Us and certainly the projects that Ursun's talking about and potentially here, we're talking about non-human perspectives of engaging with the world, taking ourselves out of the center of the equation and actually seeing more complex interrelationships that might exist between the systems and ecologies around us. So here, this act of another kind of becoming animal, where you interact in front of a screen and all of a sudden you gain wings. It seems to me to be part of that trajectory of the like VR and technology offering this non-human perspective on the world. Right?
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way. That project was sort of this was before I was doing virtual reality, and actually the work that I started doing in virtual reality was really a direct result of this project and a couple others, where I was experimenting with levels of immersion, and what I found was it's really simple. It's artificial shadow. There's connects at each one of these screens that are scanning your silhouette, and then it's feeding it through a computer and a projector that's projecting over your head. So the illusion is that you think that you're breaking the plane of a light, but it's actually a computer generated shadow, which is why it falls apart in places, because the Kinect can't totally see like the legs of that woman. She's got some leather pants on, so it can't see leather very well. But so this project was something that I was seeing people have this very, very instantaneous emotional connection to, more so than I had seen in the work that I had been doing for screens. And the reason that I started trying to pursue virtual reality, this is before even Oculus Kickstarter had happened, was because you could fit 6 people through at a time with this installation, and there was a line, and people were angry because they couldn't get in, and then people at the last one didn't want to leave, so you'd have to ask them to leave, and I wanted 1 million people in the room at the same time and not like another 6. So the only way logically to be able to do something like that was virtual reality, and that's why I started exploring it right after I finished this project. In terms of what you were talking about, though, you're saying like removing the self. I think it is really about like the self as existing in your own story, and I think what's the most fascinating about these immersive technologies is what the potential that they offer in the long term for storytelling is like the idea that we could cross this threshold that we've never really been able to cross before, which is essentially like all mediums of storytelling that we take as commonplace because they were here before we were born, are all essentially like it's storytelling. We bear witness to a story. There is an author that uses the tools of whatever medium they've chosen to, through this abstraction of those tools, create essentially the illusion of a human experience that is someone else's in some other time in some other place, and we bear witness to the construction of that story, and we resonate with it in different ways. Maybe they're similar to us, or maybe their goals or their obstacles or their struggles or their journey is similar to ours, and we resonate with it. But then we leave the theater and we go out into the world and we live story after story, which is our own. And I think what's interesting is like those stories have never. That's a medium that we've never had access to as artists. That's just fate. That's just how your life unfolds. And what I'm excited about, what these virtual reality, augmented reality, these immersive mediums, is the potential to actually be able to craft as artists the story that is uniquely yours.
I mean, I wonder. I think Ersan and I, we were in London talking about. I think we were having a pizza in Hackney Wick or something, and we were talking about the ways that if we think about a continuum of dead media, as we leave the screen behind, we're approaching a point where VR and AR are beginning to collapse together, and soon we're just going to be able to dial up or down the level of the real that we actually want to experience. A digital layer draped across the city where each of us become potentially tuned to our own augmented channels, where these kind of media leave the singular experience in a gallery or the living room and actually start to become wild, moving through the city, and that suggests some of the things that you were starting to talk about collective experience and shared experience, where AR offers some of these possibilities. I mean, do you see do you see that same point where these two kind of mediums are starting to be the one and the same thing, and we're just going to exist in this sort of mixed reality space? Is that coming? Is that on the horizon?
Yeah. The segmentation of those two technologies is only because of the infancy of both of them and how difficult they are to achieve. But if you had a perfect augmented reality headset that had full resolution and full human eye field of view, if you put a bag over your head, you would have the best virtual reality headset at the same time. So they'll inevitably be the same device, and I think that's an accurate description of probably what it will look like, is being able to dial up your level of immersion one way or the other.
It seems like I don't know, in the early days of the internet, there was a whole conversation around the idea that like things like telecommuting would distance ourselves from each other. We wouldn't need to go into the office anymore. We just kind of dial in and Skype in. What we see happening, though, in the age of the network, conditions like hashtag activism, or the way that people organize through something like the Women's March or the Climate March, where the network is enacted and enabling groups of people to come together at scales never before possible. You know, like these are marches where the most human beings ever in our history are in one place, in a way organized through the network, through technologies, whether it's a Facebook page or a hashtag or something. So, I mean, you already started to touch upon it. You know, it's amazing when I start to see some of the images that you show of Ocean of Eros, and where, you know, we're seeing VR as a collective experience that people are gathering around and huddling together. It seems like AR, when it leaves the screen and starts to become wild in the city, can start to do that again. It creates kind of shared conditions and essentially redefines what public space might start to mean. I mean, do you have the same kind of thoughts on technology and collective space?
Well, there was this incredible project, MoMAR. I don't know if you've seen it. The group of artists hacked not hacking actually. They created those geolocated art pieces embedded into MoMA in New York. And when you go there with your phone, you know, the ones who are not looking through the lens of AR were seeing the artworks. The ones who are looking through that, they were seeing the artwork selected by these group of artists. So they are sharing this one common space, one created by the curators, the other one created by the artists, like the hackers. So that is quite interesting. It takes me back to Umwelt. You know, at least we have this physical reality as a baseline, and we agree that this is a coffee table. But in a world where we all have our own reality through our goggles, how do we find those common realities between us? I don't have an answer, but that's the interesting topic that's not being actually interrogated. Reality is perceived completely differently based on your experience and your learning and you know, your background and all those things. But at least that baseline we all agree upon is there. How that's going to be affected is my main question. And like, as an artist, I find that fascinating as a field to explore. Maybe not just now because, you know, the technology is relatively limited, but, you know, 5 to 10 years time, that's the baseline reality we'll be discussing. And maybe every artist will create their reality, and like a radio channel, you'll be just like dialing into that, and that's okay.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I want to talk a little bit about your Wonderscope app, Chris. But here we're looking at one layer, which is a layer for children, kind of a G-rated version where the world becomes draped with this layer of education and creatures leaving the page of the book and starting to occupy kids' bedrooms. I could also imagine kind of the X-rated version of someone's augmented reality channel where, you know, a kid and their father are sitting in the same room. One's kind of watching something like this, the other is watching kind of crazy-ass hardcore porn. They're both sharing the same architectural space, but occupying different augmented realities in many ways. It's both I mean, the title of this event, Fear and Wonder, suggests that any kind of future we talk about have these twin realities, both technology as a tool to connect us, but also in a strange way can be misused in a whole lot of different ways. And I'm sure soon that we can download the Manchester United pack, and now this same room for me is a Manchester United space. Or if you downloaded the Star Wars pack, then we're sitting in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon or something like that. So I can imagine there's a whole lot of kind of skins that we might reimagine our world through. All coming about through the mechanism of augmented reality. That's a really bizarre segue to start to talk about Wonderscope, which is a tool of a VR app for kids, I guess. AR app for kids. Maybe we'll watch the trailer and then we can dive deeper into exploring what that might mean.
Sure.
Wonderscope.
Oh, good, you're here. We better get going now. Grandma has a lot of seeds for us to plant.
Can I touch it? That's cool.
What if you fall?
What you got there? I'll get crushed to death by the thousands of tons of water.
Oh, look at that.
That's crashing down below me.
Is that a good idea at your age?
Age ain't nothing but a number. Here we go. Time to blow away some wrinkles.
That's wild.
Quick, to Grandma's.
But I don't even know where I am.
No, Red, don't go away.
Well, there she is. Look at her. Ah, motorcycle.
There it is. You found it.
We did it.
There we go.
So it's interesting that something like reading a book was never a passive experience. So I'm intrigued by like what the Wonderscope app does in terms of valuing these type of interactions when it seemingly like, words leave the page and creatures come to life, when learning in a way becomes more like a tea party than just the turning of paper. Can you tell us about what Wonderscope is and what its intentions are?
Yeah. A lot of the conversations that we have are around looking at technologies and where they are presently and thinking about what is the most compelling story that we can tell with this technology today and who is that story for, who's the audience for that story. So before Apple announced the AR kit technology, they gave it to a few select developers who we were one of them, and they asked us what could we make with what is essentially holding up your iPhone or your iPad and looking through it into your environment. Now, what it's capable of is it can track a flat surface, a coffee table, a rug, a bedspread, and if you think about what kind of stories you're going to tell. If you're going to have more than one character and you're going to have sets, you're going to have stories in miniature. If you're going to have stories that are interactive, they're going to be animated. So animated stories in miniature that take place on floors or bedspreads, that just didn't seem like a story for like the current version of me. It sounded like a story for like the 7-year-old version of me. And because I'm not going to come home now and like kick off my shoes and crack open a beer and watch miniature stories on my coffee table and on a regular basis. So, but I would if I was 7. And so we wanted to try to incorporate reading. I was dyslexic as a kid. I had a lot of problems with reading. It's something that played a big part in my evolution as a human being. And the act of reading with your parents was, and in my case, my grandparents, was something that had a major effect on me. So we wanted to have something that parents and children could use together. What's interesting is the first thing that we built was essentially you're narrating a story and the story comes to life in front of you. So Little Red Riding Hood would be, there once was a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood who was walking through a mysterious forest, and a forest would grow out of your carpet and you would see Little Red Riding Hood walking through it. And as soon as we started showing it to kids, what we found was that we had made a big mistake. And the mistake that we made was the same mistake that we made in VR, which was trying to translate the old medium into the new medium. We had basically just translated a book one-to-one into augmented reality. And your analogy of the tea party is exactly right. What we found was that a child's expectation of the way that their relationship should be with a story that takes place in physical space, in their physical space, is totally different than their expectation of how a story works on a screen. They expect it to be like a tea party or their action figures or their stuffed animals. They expect that they can be part of that story. So we basically threw everything away and started over and started trying to create stories where the child actually plays a character inside of each of them.
And I guess it reminds me of this project, Urson, that you didn't talk about, Sweet Dreams, where essentially an inert table setting, a slice of a cow that has long since left us begins to start to moo again and tells another kind of story. Maybe you can talk through this, just to kind of, I'm trying to draw out just little relationships here between these two projects as kind of the activation or the animation of domestic environments or existing settings that in one sense are extraordinarily familiar, but through these technologies become totally transformed as different kinds of learning experiences. Because I wonder what Sweet Dreams looks like in a collaboration with a documentarian exposing battery chicken farms, or the dolphin cull of Japan. It's more fear than it is wonder, but perhaps it would be the last time we ever enjoyed a steak and we all turned vegan. So potentially there's similar kind of education potential in this, which is one of your first forays into augmented reality as well. Can you tell us a bit about this project?
Sure. So Sweet Dreams is actually, it's kind of trying to signify our death to desire and our greed at the same time in a sugar-coated way. So the debate here is just, the visuals are relatively misleading and deliberately misleading. It's a multisensory journey that you can eat, but the first story we put there was you're physically walking around in this luscious, delicious land and eating different things, and they are reacting to your presence. And at the end, you have a huge straw. It's a telescopic straw that you suck the sun, and it's really delicious. There's a real liquid coming from that straw, by the way. You are literally sucking the sun, and it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then it disappears. It's like, I think it's that easy to destroy everything and destroy even the things that gives life to us. But doing that in a way that, again, I think the educational part, I suppose, more like this multi-layered world where you can have a good time, but at the same time, if you want to look beyond, there's an underlying story there. And that was the thing that we were trying to create. Like, how do you show something that is so naive, and if a 9-year-old goes through this experience, they're going to have the best time, and someone who's a bit sensitive to the steak is going to get a different sense of what that reality is. And we're still exploring. This was the first taster, and it still has a long journey to go. But those are the things, like how different realities can exist at the same time, while different age, different backgrounds, receiving different information from the same piece. So I think that's more into the education part. Not necessarily this is not an educational piece at all, but I suppose it is time for us to redefine what education system is anyway. Like it's we're still using the same worlds that is post World War II and the same curriculum, and it's just like this ridiculous space. Whereas at least with the help of some of those technologies, we have a new opportunity to create new ways of learning, new ways of kind of understanding and perceiving information. I do believe in that. I think we can utilize some of those projects or give examples through these projects to actually change the way we learn and perceive information.
I mean, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of watching for a long time Marshmallow's work evolve from the spectacle of physical, like interactive installations and projection mapping, and Chris, obviously your extraordinary trajectory through interactive kind of web media and installation work, and now into VR. And I wonder, just as we start to kind of draw this to a close, like what you both think about the ways that really these immersive mediums that we're starting to talk through, VR, AR, XR, MR, whatever we want to start to brand it, are really starting to shape and become the medium of our generation. Like or at least experience will become the medium of our generation as we move beyond the screen, or we exploit our black rectangles into space. I wondered what you thought about that, about medium as experience, and where that starts to take us, and whether that is really the currency of what the entertainment industry and the education industry might start to become.
Chris?
Yeah, sure. The interesting thing about experience, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Museum of Ice Cream, but I'm going to ignore that when it comes to the experience. A species, just the most pre-production demanding creature on the planet, that's like, it takes so many years, a human being to become something that they can operate by themselves. And that's purely depending on the experience. We are, experience-heavy creatures, and our very existence defined and formed by the experience itself. So it's not a surprise to think that experience would be the main thing that we actually turn into currency, turn into new forms. And with that in mind, virtual reality or augmented reality, it allows us to do that. And it's the first medium, that Chris was saying, it's the first medium that is so powerful that comes with the responsibility. I think I'd like to look into that side than what you can do, because as the medium, it carries this incredible power itself, and they use for PTSD and pain management already. Quite, the most cruel visuals can take you away from the pain that you have in your body. So, and it can also disrupt your perception and understanding of authenticity and selfness. So, how do we take these things into consideration and create a world while creating ethical, immersive content? So, I think it's just like I said few words: Museum of Ice Cream, ethical content, and the future of that, artist's responsibility. I think I'm just bouncing between those three things constantly. That's where I think it should go, and those are the conversations we should have. Yeah. What do you think?
I think that the threshold that I was talking about before is one of witnessing others' human experience as storytelling, and you cross over the threshold, and it is the crafting of human experience as the medium itself. And I've said previously, I think virtual reality represents the last medium, not because it's the best medium. In fact, what you're seeing right now is the equivalent of the early days of cinema. This is silent black and white film, hand cranked. But what it represents is going from essentially an externalized expression of storytelling to an internalized one, where your consciousness becomes becomes the actual media. It becomes the canvas for a completely new kind of storytelling, and it's one that I don't think we as creators even have the language for, nor necessarily do we even have the tools for what the ultimate final form of it will be. Yeah, it's a brave new world for sure.
All right, let's close the conversation out there. Thanks so much to Chris and Ersin. Please just stay there. I thought it was important to finish with both of these guys here on the couch, just on this notion that as we journey through fiction, it really is an extraordinary shared medium. It helps us to deal with realities that, like fiction is a way to come to terms with a reality that we often struggle to grasp, where these stories that we've traveled through across the last few hours of imagined lands all help us to start to visualize other possible futures that may sit outside of the ones that perhaps all too often feel inescapable. So as our journey ends and the curtain closes and our spacecraft docks and we ride off into the sunset, we're all locked in this rain-drenched kiss goodbye. I want to say thank you to all our fellow travelers for joining us tonight. It was a privilege to ride with you. Thanks for sticking in there. I know we lost some journeymen on the way. You're all troopers. Thanks for hanging in there. But really, what I want to try and do with Fear and Wonder, and the point that we rallied around when we were trying to put this together was really this idea that this tour and these kind of expeditions through these landscapes and these methods and practices is really a call to arms. I hope that we all might keep making stories that become vessels for critical ideas, Trojan horses hidden within the mediums of popular culture. Because in many ways there'd be monsters off the map, and the more we imagine in these speculative new territories, the sites where they might dwell may come just a little bit smaller. So in many ways, at the end of Fear and Wonder, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking out these new landscapes, but in returning to the place where we started, but perhaps with fresh eyes. So thanks you, everyone. Thanks to Stephanie and Reza and Phil and all the gang. Thanks to the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for giving us money. Thank you to sticking with us. Thanks and good night. Thanks at the end.